Poor boy gives his only $1 to undercover millionaire. 2 days later, he changes his life completely. Before we dive into the story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. The autumn wind bit through Tyler Johnson's thin jacket as he dragged the rusty cart down Maple Street. At 10 years old, his small hands were already calloused from collecting cardboard each morning before school. Boston's financial district towered in the distance, its gleaming skyscrapers mocking the run-down neighborhood he called home. "We've got enough for today, Tyler," Natalie called, checking her watch. Her nurse's scrubs peeked from beneath her coat. She'd head straight to her first shift after dropping Tyler at school. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, but her smile remained warm as she ruffled her son's sandy brown hair. Tyler nodded, carefully folding the last cardboard box. The recycling center would give them $5 for today's haul, enough for his lunch and maybe a used book from the thrift store if they were lucky. He patted the single-dollar bill in his pocket, his reward from yesterday's collection that his mother had insisted he keep. "Look sharp, Tyler," Natalie whispered, nodding toward the bus stop ahead. A man sat hunched on the sidewalk beside the bench, not on it. His clothes were layered and worn, his beard unkempt. Yet something about his piercing blue eyes caught Tyler's attention. They seemed too alert, too aware for someone who appeared to have given up. As they approached, Tyler slowed his cart. The usual city soundtrack faded. Honking horns, distant sirens, the clatter of the early commuter train, all seemed to dim as he studied the stranger. "Morning," the man said, his voice surprisingly clear. Tyler glanced at his mother, who gave an almost imperceptible nod, her eyes cautious but kind. "Good morning, sir," Tyler replied, stopping a respectful distance away. The man's gaze flickered between Tyler and the cart of cardboard. "Tough way to start the day," he observed. Tyler shrugged. "We do what we need to do." The man nodded, a flash of something, recognition, respect, crossing his weathered face. "I don't suppose." He hesitated. "You could spare $1 for some breakfast?" Without hesitation, Tyler reached into his pocket and extended the crumpled bill. "Here you go." The man stared at the offered dollar, making no move to take it. "Won't you need this yourself?" "My mom says we should always help when we can," Tyler answered simply. "Everyone deserves kindness." Something shifted in the man's expression as he slowly accepted the money. "Thank you," he said, his voice suddenly hoarse. "That's rare these days." As Tyler and Natalie continued their journey, the boy remained unaware that the homeless man watching them leave was Alexander Miller, tech mogul worth billions, whose life was about to change direction as dramatically as the one he planned to transform. The penthouse suite atop Miller Tower gleamed with morning sunlight as Alexander Miller shed his tattered disguise. The hot shower washed away dirt from his homeless appearance, but couldn't cleanse the emotions stirred by the boy with the dollar. "Your 9 a.m. board meeting starts in 20 minutes, sir," James Parker announced through the intercom. Alexander's attorney had served him faithfully for 15 years, managing both his business empire and rare eccentricities like his social experiments. "Cancel it," Alexander replied, staring at the crumpled dollar bill on his marble countertop. James entered, impeccably dressed in contrast to Alexander's bathrobe. "Everything all right, sir? You seem affected." Alexander turned, his piercing blue eyes, the same ones that had studied Tyler, now filled with purpose. "I met someone today, James. A child who gave away his only dollar to a stranger. Commendable." James nodded politely, used to his employer's occasional philosophical moods. "No, you don't understand." Alexander's voice grew intense. This boy and his mother were collecting cardboard themselves. They clearly had nothing to spare. James remained professional, though concern flickered across his face. "I see." Alexander walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows. Below, Boston sprawled like a miniature kingdom. Somewhere down there was a boy who'd shown more humanity in one moment than he'd seen in countless boardrooms. "I want to know everything about them," Alexander said quietly. "Name, situation, needs, everything." Meanwhile, Tyler sat in Ms. Harrison's classroom, his stomach growling. Without his dollar, lunch would be just the free milk today. But he didn't regret his decision. "Tyler Johnson, are you listening?" Ms. Harrison's voice cut through his thoughts. "Yes, ma'am," he answered quickly, though his mind had been elsewhere. After school, Tyler waited outside as other children were picked up by parents in comfortable cars. He would walk to the library where he'd study until his mother finished her first shift at Boston General. At that same moment, in a gleaming office 40 floors above the city, James placed a manila folder on Alexander's desk. "That was fast," Alexander noted, impressed. "The boy's name is Tyler Johnson, 10 years old. Lives with his mother, Natalie Johnson, a nurse working double shifts at 2 hospitals. Father abandoned them 4 years ago." Alexander opened the folder, studying a school photo of Tyler's smiling face. "And the financial situation?" James hesitated. "Dire. They're 2 months behind on rent for a 1-bedroom apartment in Riverdale Heights." Alexander closed the folder, his decision made. "Prepare everything. We're going to help them." "In what way, sir?" "In every way," Alexander answered, the crumpled dollar bill still on his desk, a reminder of a kindness he hadn't experienced in years. A sharp knock at the door broke the evening calm of the Johnson apartment. Tyler looked up from his homework, his brow furrowed. They rarely had visitors, especially on weeknights. "Stay at the table," Natalie instructed, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She approached the door cautiously, peering through the peephole. A tall man in an expensive suit stood in the hallway, his posture formal but unthreatening. He wasn't from the building management, they always came in pairs to discuss late rent. "Who is it?" she called, one hand instinctively reaching for her phone. "James Parker, attorney for Alexander Miller," came the polite reply. "I'd like to speak with you regarding a matter concerning your son Tyler." Natalie's heart raced. How did this stranger know her son's name? She opened the door a crack, chain still fastened. "My son? What about him?" Her voice carried the fierce protectiveness of a mother prepared to defend her child. James offered a business card through the narrow opening. "I assure you, Ms. Johnson, this is a positive matter. Mr. Miller had a significant encounter with Tyler recently." The heavy cardstock bore an embossed logo, Parker and Associates, legal counsel to Miller Enterprises. Natalie had seen the Miller name on buildings downtown, on technology products, even in hospital equipment. After a moment's hesitation, she unfastened the chain. James stepped inside, his eyes adjusting to the modest apartment. Though small and sparsely furnished, it was immaculately clean. Children's drawings brightened the walls, covering water stains and chipped paint. "Hello, Tyler," James said, noticing the boy watching curiously from the kitchen table. Tyler studied the stranger. Then his eyes widened in recognition when James mentioned meeting someone yesterday. "Is the blue-eyed man okay?" James smiled, genuinely touched. "The blue-eyed man is my employer, Alexander Miller. And yes, he's very well. Thanks to your kindness." Natalie looked between them, confused. "I don't understand." "Ms. Johnson," James began, "Mr. Miller occasionally conducts what he calls social research. He was impressed by Tyler's generosity and would like to offer something in return." "Something?" Natalie repeated skeptically. James opened his briefcase, removing an envelope. "Mr. Miller would like to establish an educational trust for Tyler, covering his schooling through university. Additionally, he'd like to offer you a position at the Miller Foundation's healthcare initiative, with a substantial salary increase from your current positions." Natalie stared at the envelope, stunned. "Why would he do this for strangers?" "Because," James replied softly, "in a world where most people look away, your son chose kindness. Mr. Miller believes that deserves recognition." The prestigious Westbrook Academy loomed before Tyler, its red brick facade and manicured lawns a stark contrast to his previous public school. Students in crisp uniforms streamed through the entrance, their carefree chatter emphasizing his outsider status. "You ready?" Natalie squeezed his hand, her own anxiety barely concealed beneath her encouraging smile. Tyler nodded, though his stomach churned with uncertainty. 2 weeks had passed since James Parker's visit, and their lives had transformed at dizzying speed. After careful consideration and several frank discussions with Alexander Miller himself, Natalie had accepted his offer with clear boundaries. "Remember, just be yourself," she whispered, straightening his new blazer. "That's what got us here in the first place." As they approached the administrative building, a familiar figure waited on the steps, Alexander Miller, no longer disguised as a homeless man, but imposing in a tailored suit. Yet his blue eyes remained the same, lighting with genuine warmth when he spotted them. "Tyler, Ms. Johnson," he greeted them, extending his hand. "I thought I'd welcome you personally on your first day." Natalie shook his hand firmly. Despite his generosity, she maintained a cautious distance, determined that their arrangement remained dignified rather than charity. "That wasn't necessary, Mr. Miller," she said, "but we appreciate the gesture." Alexander knelt to Tyler's level. "Nervous?" "A little," Tyler admitted. "Everyone looks different here." "They're just kids like you," Alexander reassured him. "And they'll be lucky to know you." After introducing Tyler to the headmaster and seeing him to his classroom, Alexander walked Natalie to her car. "He'll be fine," he said, noting her concerned glances back at the building. "I know," she sighed. "It's just, everything's changing. So fast." "Change can be good," Alexander reminded her gently. "Your new position starts tomorrow." Natalie nodded. The Miller Foundation's healthcare initiative offered regular hours and triple her previous salary, a miracle for a single mother who'd been working double shifts for years. "I'm still not entirely comfortable with all this," she confessed, gesturing vaguely at their new circumstances. Alexander's expression grew serious. "You're not obligated. To me, Ms. Johnson. Consider it an investment in potential, yours and Tyler's." As they parted ways, neither noticed the weathered sedan parked across the street, its driver watching with calculating eyes. Robert Johnson, Tyler's long-absent father, tapped his fingers against the steering wheel, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Well, well," he murmured. "Looks like my family's moving up in the world." Robert Johnson's one-bedroom apartment in South Boston told the story of a life unraveled. Empty beer bottles crowded the coffee table. Bills with red, final notice stamps lay scattered across the kitchenette, and a duffel bag remained half-packed by the door, always ready for a hasty departure. He flicked through the photos on his phone, blurry images captured outside Westbrook Academy. Tyler looked different in his uniform. Older somehow, less like the 6-year-old Robert had walked out on. The boy's mother appeared transformed too, her exhausted demeanor replaced by a confidence Robert had never seen during their troubled marriage. "Jackpot," he muttered, opening his laptop to search for information about Alexander Miller. News. Articles detailed the tech mogul's billions, his philanthropic foundation, and occasional eccentricities. One headline caught Robert's attention: "Miller's Mysterious Social Experiments." The article described how the billionaire sometimes disguised himself as ordinary citizens to experience authentic human connections. Robert's lips curled into a calculating smile. He'd always prided himself on recognizing opportunities, even if he rarely capitalized on them successfully. This situation practically screamed potential. Across town in his penthouse office, Alexander stood before the window wall, the city sprawling below. On his desk sat a framed photograph of a woman and child, their smiles frozen in a moment, from another lifetime. "The reports from Westbrook are excellent," James said, entering with a folder. "Tyler's testing above grade level despite his previous educational disadvantages." Alexander nodded, not turning from the window. "And Natalie?" "Starting well at the foundation. Her practical experience is already proving valuable to the hospital." Initiative. A faint smile crossed Alexander's face. "Good." James hesitated before asking, "May I speak frankly, sir?" Alexander turned, his blue eyes questioning. "Your interest in the Johnsons, It goes beyond your usual philanthropy. Is it because of Emily and Catherine? The names hung in the air like ghosts. Alexander's gaze drifted to the photograph. His wife and daughter, lost in a car accident 5 years ago. The same accident he'd survived, leaving him with billions, but no one to share them with. Tyler reminds me of her sometimes, he admitted quietly. Not in appearance, but in spirit. Emily had that same instinctive kindness. I understand that, sir, but I worry. That I'm trying to replace them? Alexander shook his head. No, James, I'm honoring them. There's a difference. James nodded, unconvinced but respectful. There's one more thing you should know. I've detected someone making inquiries about the Johnsons' new circumstances. Alexander's expression hardened. Who? Robert Johnson, Tyler's father. Tyler's favorite spot at Westbrook Academy was the science lab, where Mrs. Winters allowed him to stay after classes to conduct extra experiments. Today he was carefully measuring liquids into test tubes, his concentration absolute. Hey, science. Kid, a voice called from the doorway. Tyler looked up, the pipette freezing in his hand. A man leaned against the doorframe, tall and lanky with a familiar jawline that Tyler saw every morning in the mirror. Dad? The word felt strange on his tongue, unused for 4 years. Robert Johnson grinned, sauntering into the lab. Look, at you, all grown up in that fancy uniform. His eyes scanned the expensive equipment. Quite an upgrade from your old school, huh? Mrs. Winters appeared behind Robert, her expression concerned. Tyler, is this a family member? Yes, ma'am, Tyler answered automatically, though family seemed a tenuous description for this stranger with his father's face. My dad. Well, visiting hours are almost over, she reminded them gently. The lab needs to be cleaned before I leave. As Tyler packed his backpack, his hands trembled slightly. Questions flooded his mind. How did his father find him? Why now after all these years? They walked across the courtyard in awkward silence until Robert spoke. Your mom around? She works at the Miller Foundation now. Tyler replied cautiously. She'll pick me up at 5. Robert checked his watch. That gives us an hour to catch up. He clapped Tyler's shoulder. How about ice cream? There's a place down the street. Tyler hesitated. His mother had always said his father wasn't a bad man, just a lost one who couldn't handle responsibility. But her eyes always held a sadness when she spoke of him that made Tyler wary. I should call Mom first, he said. Robert's smile tightened. Can't a father spend time with his son without permission? Before Tyler could respond, a sleek car pulled up alongside them, the window lowered, revealing Natalie's shocked face. Robert? Her voice was barely audible. Surprise, Robert replied with a casual wave, as if he'd just stepped out for milk 4 years ago instead of vanishing from their lives. Thought I'd reconnect with my boy. Natalie's stunned expression shifted to protective anger. Tyler, get in the car, please. Later that evening, in Alexander's office, Natalie paced furiously. 4 years, not a phone call, not a birthday card. Nothing. And now he just shows up? Alexander watched her, concern evident in his blue eyes. Why do you think he's back? Natalie stopped pacing, her voice dropping. Why do you think? It's not because he suddenly remembered he has a son. It's because that son now has connections to Alexander Miller. The Boston Public Library had always been Tyler's sanctuary. Today, tucked in a quiet corner between towering shelves, he opened his laptop, a gift from Alexander that still felt strange in his hands. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, hesitant before typing, Robert Johnson, Boston. The search results painted a troubling picture. Newspaper articles about gambling debts, court records for missed child support payments, a small item about a bar fight 3 years ago. Each piece of information chipped away at the charming facade his father had presented during their ice cream outing yesterday. Tyler's throat tightened as he clicked through the digital breadcrumbs of his father's troubled life. Robert had spun tales of business ventures gone wrong and promised things would be different now. We can be a real family again, he'd said, squeezing Tyler's shoulder. A shadow fell across the screen. Tyler looked up to find James Parker standing beside his table. Doing some research? James asked, his voice gentle. Tyler quickly closed the browser. Just homework. James sat down, placing his briefcase on the table. Your mother mentioned you might be here. He paused, studying Tyler's face. She's worried about you. I'm fine, Tyler insisted, though his voice betrayed him. It's difficult when someone returns to our lives unexpectedly, James observed. Especially someone who left without explanation. Tyler stared at the closed laptop. He said he's changed. James nodded thoughtfully. People can change, but true change reveals itself through consistent actions, not convenient timing. The implication hung in the air. Tyler's eyes welled with tears he refused to shed. My father knows about Mr. Miller, doesn't he? He asked, already knowing the answer. Before James could respond, Tyler's phone buzzed, a text from his mother asking him to come home. Something in her tone seemed urgent. At the apartment, Tyler found Natalie and Robert in the living room, the tension between them thick enough to touch. Their voices had been raised before he arrived. He could tell by his mother's flushed cheeks and his father's defensive posture. Tyler, Natalie said, visibly trying to compose herself. Could you give us a few more minutes? No, Robert interrupted. He should hear this. It concerns him too. He turned to Tyler, his expression suddenly sympathetic. Your mother doesn't want us to be a family again. She's refusing my reasonable request for some financial support after all these years of struggling. That's not what you asked for, Natalie hissed. Tell him what you really said. Robert's smile hardened. I simply pointed out that as Tyler's father, I have certain legal rights. Rights that could become complicated if I'm not treated fairly in this new arrangement. The meaning crystallized in Tyler's mind with terrible clarity. His father hadn't returned for him. He'd returned for Alexander Miller's money. Tyler's world had collapsed into jagged pieces that no longer fit together. 3 days had passed since he'd discovered his father's true intentions, and he'd barely spoken since. At school, he went through the motions, completing assignments, answering when called upon, but his usual enthusiasm had vanished. Ms. Evans, his English teacher, held him back after class. Tyler, is everything all right? Your essay was, she hesitated. Technically perfect, but missing your usual spark. I'm fine, he replied automatically, the words hollow even to his own ears. Outside, the autumn rain matched his mood, gray and relentless. He stood under the covered walkway, watching classmates dash to waiting cars with bright umbrellas. Alexander's driver would arrive soon, another change he still couldn't reconcile. Hey. A girl with dark braids appeared beside him. Lily Whitmore, his lab partner. You want to talk about it? About what? Whatever's making you look like that. She gestured, vaguely at his face, like someone stole your science fair project. Despite himself, Tyler almost smiled. It's complicated, Lily shrugged. Most important things are. Before he could respond, a familiar car pulled up, not the Miller Foundation vehicle, but his mother's modest sedan. Natalie waved from the driver's seat, concern evident even through the rain-streaked windshield. That's my mom, Tyler said. She's supposed to be at work. Good luck with your complicated thing, Lily called as he dashed through the rain. Inside the car, Natalie gripped the steering wheel tightly. I wanted to pick you up myself today. Is it about Dad? Her silence confirmed his suspicion. He's demanding money, isn't he? Tyler's voice cracked. That's the only reason he came back. Natalie reached over to brush his damp hair from his forehead. Your father has always struggled with making good choices. Mr. Miller could just pay him to go away again, Tyler said bitterly. Is that what you want? Natalie asked carefully. The question hung between them. Did he want his father gone? The father who disappeared for 4 years, whose return had nothing to do with missing his son? I don't know what I want anymore, Tyler admitted. Everything was fine before. Before the sandwich, before Mr. Miller, before Dad came back. Natalie's eyes widened in alarm. Tyler, you can't think that your kindness caused all this. But he was already spiraling. Maybe Mr. Miller just feels sorry for us. Maybe he's using us for some PR stunt. Maybe everyone just wants something. That's not true, Natalie insisted, though the uncertainty in her voice betrayed her own lingering doubts. Tyler turned toward the window, watching raindrops race down the glass, merging and separating like the complicated relationships in his life. How can we know who's really being honest with us? The Miller Foundation occupied 3 floors of a gleaming downtown building. Tyler sat in a plush waiting area, while Natalie attended an emergency meeting with Alexander and James. Though invited to join, he'd refused, preferring the company of his tangled thoughts. "You must be Tyler," said a gentle voice. He looked up to find an elderly woman with silver hair and kind eyes watching him. "Yes, ma'am. I'm Margaret Wilson, Alexander's assistant." She sat beside him. "I've heard a lot about you." Tyler stiffened. "What did Mr. Miller tell you?" "That you're remarkably observant and kind. That you gave your only dollar to a stranger." Her smile deepened the creases around her eyes. "And that you're having a difficult time." "Did he tell you my dad came back just for money?" Tyler blurted out. Margaret didn't seem surprised by his outburst. "No, but that doesn't shock me. People often reappear when circumstances change." Tyler studied her, sensing something genuine in her manner. "Did something like that happen to you?" She nodded. "My husband left when times were hard. Returned when I inherited my parents' house." Her eyes held no bitterness, only wisdom earned through experience. "Some people are like weather vanes. They turn whichever way the wind blows. It's not your fault." "But how do I know Mr. Miller isn't the same?" Tyler asked, voicing his deepest fear. "Maybe he's just using us for, I don't know, to feel good about himself." Margaret considered. I've worked for Alexander for 15 years, before and after he lost his family." She leaned closer. "The man who returned from that tragedy was hollow, until he met you." Before Tyler could respond, the conference room door opened. James emerged first, his expression grave as he spoke into his phone. Alexander and Natalie followed, deep in conversation. "What's happening?" Tyler asked, reading concern in his mother's face. Natalie knelt before him. "Your father has hired a lawyer. He's threatening to sue for partial custody unless we agree to a significant financial settlement." Tyler's stomach dropped. "Can he do that?" "He can try," Alexander said, his voice steady with controlled anger. "But we won't let that happen." For the first time since discovering his father's motives, Tyler felt something beyond betrayal and confusion, a flicker of resolve. Looking between his mother's determined face, Alexander's protective stance, and even James's focused professionalism, he realized something profound. These people, this unlikely coalition, formed because of a simple act of kindness. They were fighting for him. Not for what he represented or what they could gain, but for him. "What can I do?" he asked, standing straighter. "To help fight back?" The playground at Parker Memorial Park stood empty as evening approached, swings swaying gently in the autumn breeze. Tyler sat alone on a bench watching the sunset paint the sky in fiery oranges and reds. This park had been his refuge in the old days, when his mother worked double shifts and Mrs. Martinez from downstairs would bring him here to play. He heard footsteps on the gravel path but didn't turn. Somehow he knew who it was. "Thought I might find you here," Robert said, settling onto the bench beside him. "Your mom used to bring you here when you were little." Tyler remained silent, studying his father's profile, the familiar jawline, the same cowlick at the temple that he himself struggled with every morning. Physical similarities that meant nothing compared to the gulf between them. "You're angry with me," Robert observed. "I get that. But you're old enough now to understand how the world works. People like us need to be smart about opportunities." "People like us?" Tyler finally spoke, his voice quiet but steady. "People who've had to struggle." Robert leaned forward, elbows on knees. Look, your mom's a great woman, always was, but she's being naive. Miller isn't helping you out of the goodness of his heart. Nobody gives away money without wanting something in return. What do you want in return? Tyler asked pointedly. Robert blinked, caught off guard by the direct question. I want what's best for my son. You left when I was 6, Tyler said, the words tumbling out with surprising calm. You didn't call on my birthdays. You didn't help when Mom worked so hard she would fall asleep with her uniform still on. I had my reasons, and now you're back because Mr. Miller is helping us. Tyler stood surprising himself with his own boldness. That's not wanting what's best for me. That's wanting what's best for you. Robert's expression hardened. You don't understand adult problems, kid. I'm your father. I have rights. Rights aren't the same as caring, Tyler replied, remembering Margaret's words. And caring shows up, even when there's nothing to gain. A sleek black car pulled up to the curb. Alexander emerged from the driver's side, Natalie from the passenger seat. Their expressions shifted from relief at finding Tyler to wariness at seeing Robert. Tyler, are you okay? Natalie called, hurrying toward them. Robert stood, his friendly facade evaporating. Well, if it isn't the billionaire savior and his charity case. That's enough, Robert, Natalie warned, placing a protective arm around Tyler's shoulders. Alexander approached calmly, his blue eyes, the same ones that had once gazed at Tyler from beneath a disheveled beard, now cold with controlled anger. Mr. Johnson, he acknowledged, I believe we need to talk. The Miller Estates garden pavilion offered a peaceful sanctuary from the brewing legal storm. Crystal lanterns bathed the space in warm light as the evening air carried the scent of autumn roses. Tyler sat cross-legged on a cushioned bench, sketching the koi pond with colored pencils Alexander had given him. Natalie watched from a few feet away, her conversation with Alexander pausing as they both observed the boy's focused expression. For the first time in weeks, Tyler seemed momentarily unburdened. He has talent, Alexander remarked quietly. Natalie nodded. He's always had an eye for detail. Even as a toddler, he'd noticed things others missed. They fell into comfortable silence, the kind that had gradually developed between them over shared concern for Tyler. The confrontation with Robert at the park had been tense but revelatory, Tyler standing his ground with unexpected maturity. I've been thinking, Alexander said eventually, about why your son's gesture affected me so deeply. Natalie turned to him, sensing something important in his tone. 5 years ago, I lost my wife Catherine and daughter Emily in a car accident. His voice remained steady, though pain shadowed his eyes. I was driving. A truck ran a red light. I survived. They didn't. Alexander, I'm so sorry, Natalie whispered. Afterward, I buried myself in work, built more, acquired more, donated more, all while feeling less. He watched Tyler dip his brush in water. Then your son offered his only dollar to a stranger, expecting nothing in return. It was a wake-up call. Is that why you helped us? Natalie asked, the question that had lingered between them for months. Initially, perhaps, but now? Alexander's gaze met hers. Now it's because I've come to care about both of you. The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable. Natalie reached out, briefly touching his hand, a simple gesture of understanding between two people who had endured different forms of loss. Tyler approached, holding out his completed drawing, the koi pond rendered in surprising detail, with Alexander and Natalie sitting together in the background. It's beautiful, Alexander said, genuine admiration in his voice. Tyler's smile was tentative but real. Thanks for the art supplies, and, he hesitated, for helping with Dad. We're in this together, Natalie assured him, pulling him into a hug. As they headed inside for dinner, none of them noticed James Parker's car arriving, his expression grave as he clutched a legal folder. The calm moment in the garden would soon give way to the approaching storm. The Boston family court building loomed gray and imposing against the morning sky. Tyler adjusted his tie nervously as they climbed the stone steps, flanked by Alexander and James. Reporters clustered at the entrance, their questions overlapping, in a confusing jumble. Ms. Johnson, is it true your ex-husband is claiming? Mr. Miller, are you financially supporting the Johnsons in exchange for? Tyler, how do you feel about your father returning after? James deftly guided them through the throng. No comments at this time, he repeated firmly, shielding Tyler from the cameras. Inside, the polished marble halls echoed with footsteps and hushed conversations. Tyler spotted Robert across the atrium, huddled with a slick-looking attorney in an expensive suit. Their eyes met briefly before Tyler looked away, his stomach nodding. Remember, Natalie whispered, squeezing his hand. You don't have to speak unless Judge Harmon directly asks you something. The courtroom felt smaller than Tyler had imagined from TV shows. Judge Harmon, a stern-faced woman with silver-rimmed glasses, surveyed the room with practiced neutrality. Robert's attorney, Mr. Sloan, presented their case first. His voice oozed calculated sympathy as he painted Robert as a reformed father, seeking reconciliation, cruelly blocked by a mother who'd leveraged her son's connection to a billionaire. My client simply wants shared custody of his son, Sloan concluded. A right being denied because Ms. Johnson and Mr. Miller have formed an unusual arrangement that excludes the boy's biological father. Tyler felt his cheeks burn as Sloan implied something inappropriate between his mother and Alexander. He glanced at Alexander, whose expression remained impassive despite the insinuations. When James rose to speak, his approach contrasted sharply with Sloane's theatrics. He methodically presented Robert's history of abandonment, the missed child support payments, and the suspicious timing of his reappearance. Your Honor, James concluded, Mr. Johnson showed no interest in his parental rights until financial opportunity presented itself. This isn't about reconnection, it's about exploitation. Judge Harmon studied both attorneys before addressing the room. I'd like to speak with Tyler privately in my chambers. Tyler's heart raced as he followed the judge into her office. Unlike the imposing courtroom, her chambers felt almost cozy, with family photos and law books lining the shelves. Sit down, Tyler, she said kindly. I'd like to hear your perspective, without the lawyers and parents present. Tyler took a deep breath, remembering Alexander's advice. Just speak your truth, that's all anyone can ask of you. As the door closed behind him, Tyler squared his shoulders, finally ready to make his voice heard. The tension in the courtroom was palpable as everyone awaited Tyler's return from the judge's chambers. Natalie clasped her hands tightly in her lap, while Alexander maintained his composed exterior, despite the stakes. Robert fidgeted in his seat, occasionally whispering to his attorney. When the door finally opened, Tyler emerged with a quiet confidence that hadn't been there before. Judge Harmon followed, her expression revealing nothing as she resumed her position at the bench. Having spoken with Tyler and reviewed all evidence presented, I'm ready to proceed with witness testimony, she announced. Mr. Sloan, call your first witness. Robert's attorney strutted forward. The defense calls Mrs. Eleanor Gibson. A thin woman with a pinched expression took the stand. As Tyler's former elementary school teacher, Mrs. Gibson recalled times when Tyler arrived at school tired or hungry before Alexander's intervention. The boy often seemed neglected, she stated with practiced concern. Worn clothes, incomplete homework. His mother was rarely available for conferences. James cross-examined with precision. Was Ms. Johnson working double shifts as a nurse during this period? I believe so, Mrs. Gibson admitted reluctantly. And did Tyler ever show signs of abuse or genuine neglect? Or simply the challenges faced by a hard-working single mother? Mrs. Gibson's testimony crumbled under James's questioning, but Robert's attorney pressed on, calling 3 more witnesses who painted similar pictures of the Johnsons' financial struggles. When James's turn came, his first witness surprised everyone. The defense calls Margaret Wilson. Alexander's executive assistant took the stand, her silver hair gleaming under the courtroom lights. Ms. Wilson, please describe your observations of the relationship between Natalie Johnson and her son. Margaret spoke with quiet authority. In my 15 years working for Mr. Miller, I've observed many parent-child relationships. Few demonstrate the dedicated bond I've seen between Ms. Johnson and Tyler. As more witnesses came forward, Tyler's current teachers praising his character, neighbors describing Natalie's sacrifices, even the elderly Mrs. Martinez who'd watched Tyler after school, the narrative began to shift. Then the courtroom doors opened and a woman in a crisp business suit entered. Robert visibly paled. "Your Honor," James announced, "we call Ms. Diane Peterson." As Robert's former girlfriend approached the stand, his attorney leaped up. "Objection, this witness wasn't on the list." "Last-minute addition, Your Honor. Crucial testimony regarding Mr. Johnson's character and intentions." Judge Harmon allowed it over Sloane's protests. Diane's testimony was devastating. She detailed Robert's pattern of abandoning responsibilities, his gambling debts, and most damning, his explicit statement upon learning about Tyler's connection to Alexander Miller. "I'm about to cash in on my kid hitting the jackpot." By the time court adjourned for the day, the atmosphere had shifted dramatically. Outside on the courthouse steps, reporters again swarmed, but this time James allowed a brief statement. "Today's proceedings revealed the truth about Robert Johnson's intentions," he said calmly. "We remain confident that justice will prevail for Tyler." Later that evening at the Miller estate, Tyler sat quietly in the library, processing the day's events. Alexander found him there, surrounded by books but reading none of them. "You did well today," Alexander said, taking a seat nearby. Tyler looked up. "I just told the truth. Sometimes that's the hardest thing to do." Alexander paused. "Your father's attorney has approached James about a settlement." Tyler's eyes widened. "What kind of settlement?" "They're retreating," Alexander explained. "But I want you to know, this decision isn't mine or even your mother's alone. Your voice matters in this." For the first time since the ordeal began, Tyler felt a sense of control returning. Whatever came next, he would face it on his terms, surrounded by people who truly cared. The first snow of winter dusted Boston's rooftops, transforming the city into a postcard scene. In Alexander's penthouse study, a fire crackled in the hearth as three adults spoke in hushed tones while Tyler sat by the window, watching snowflakes swirl against the darkening sky. "It's a reasonable offer," James explained, reviewing the settlement papers. "Robert relinquishes all parental rights and claims in exchange for a one-time payment." Natalie's expression remained skeptical. "And we're supposed to trust he'll stay away this time?" "The agreement includes a non-contact clause with severe penalties," James assured her. "Plus, the payment would be structured through a trust, released in increments contingent on his continued absence from Tyler's life." Alexander, who had been quietly listening, turned to Tyler. "What are you thinking about over there?" The adults fell silent, reminded that the legal battle they'd been discussing ultimately centered around the boy by the window. Tyler turned from the snowy view. At 11 now, his face had begun losing its childish roundness, hardened slightly by the past months of stress, yet his eyes held a wisdom beyond his years. "I've been thinking about family," Tyler said thoughtfully, "about what makes someone family." The adults exchanged glances as Tyler continued. "My teacher, Mrs. Winter, says family is more than DNA. It's about who shows up, who stays." He looked directly at his father's lawyer's proposal on the coffee table. "Dad never stayed before. This paper just makes official what was already true." Natalie crossed the room to sit beside her son. "Are you okay with that? With making it official that he won't be in your life?" Tyler considered the question carefully. "I used to dream about him coming back, that he'd just changed his mind about leaving us." His voice wavered slightly. "But when he did come back, it wasn't for me. It was for money. Sometimes people can't give what they don't have themselves," Alexander said gently. "Your father's failings aren't a reflection of your worth, Tyler." The boy nodded, absorbing the truth of these words. "I think we should accept the agreement so we can move forward." James nodded approvingly. "I'll finalize everything tomorrow. With luck, this will be resolved before the holidays." As James gathered his papers, Tyler turned to Alexander with unexpected directness. "Can I ask you something important?" "Of course," Alexander replied. "Why did you really help us?" Was it because of your daughter? The room stilled. Though Alexander had shared the story of his family's tragedy with Natalie, he'd never discussed it directly with Tyler. Alexander moved to sit across from Tyler, meeting his gaze with honesty. Initially, perhaps, your kindness reminded me of Emily. She had that same instinct to help others, to see beyond surface appearances. He paused, gathering his thoughts. But that was just the beginning. Who you are, who you and your mother are together. That's why I stayed involved. Not because you remind me of what I lost, but because you showed me what I could still find. Purpose, connection, even joy. Tyler studied Alexander's face, searching for any hint of insincerity. Finding none, he nodded, seemingly satisfied. I think, Tyler said carefully, that family isn't always who you're born to. Sometimes it's who you choose, and who chooses you back. The wisdom in those simple words hung in the air, a truth recognized by everyone in the room. Whatever resolution the legal documents would bring tomorrow, the more meaningful resolution had already occurred. The recognition of connections formed not through obligation, but through genuine care and choice. The last traces of winter snow melted into spring puddles as Tyler stood at the podium in Westbrook Academy's auditorium. At 12 years old, he'd grown several inches in the past year, his voice occasionally cracking as he addressed the gathered audience of students, parents, and community members. 2 years ago, I gave my only dollar to someone who needed it, he began, his confidence growing with each word. I didn't know that simple act would change so many lives, including my own. The audience listened intently as Tyler spoke about the Thompson Miller Foundation for Family Support, the new initiative being launched today. In the front row, Natalie beamed with pride, while Alexander watched with quiet satisfaction, his blue eyes, once hidden behind a disheveled disguise, now clear and purposeful. The legal battle with Robert had ended more swiftly than anyone anticipated. Faced with mounting evidence against him in a custody case he couldn't win, Robert had accepted the settlement, signed away his parental rights, and disappeared from Boston altogether. The payment he received was modest, enough to give him a fresh start elsewhere, but structured in a way that incentivized his permanent absence from Tyler's life. Our foundation will provide resources for single-parent families facing hardship, Tyler continued. Not just financial help, but mentorship, educational support, and community connections. Because sometimes what people need most isn't a handout, but a hand up. These weren't just words to Tyler. Over the past year, he'd witnessed the power of meaningful support firsthand. His mother had flourished in her role at the Miller Foundation, eventually becoming its executive director of community health initiatives. Their new apartment in a pleasant neighborhood near Westbrook Academy felt like a true home, decorated with Tyler's artwork and filled with books they both loved. And Alexander had become something neither he nor Tyler could have anticipated. Trusted friend, advisor, and steady presence in their lives, not replacing what was lost but creating something new and valuable. The most important lesson I've learned, Tyler said, his voice strong and clear, is that kindness creates possibilities we can't imagine. One small act can start a ripple that keeps growing. As he concluded his speech to enthusiastic applause, Tyler caught sight of Lily Whitmore, now his closest friend, giving him a thumbs up from the second row. Beside her sat Mrs. Martinez from their old neighborhood, and even Ms. Gibson, his former teacher whose courtroom testimony had eventually shifted to support their case. The reception following the ceremony buzzed with conversation as donors and community partners discussed the foundation's plans. Tyler found a quiet moment with Alexander near the refreshment table. Nervous about your first board meeting next week? Alexander asked, passing Tyler a glass of punch. The foundation had created a special youth advisory board, with Tyler serving as its inaugural chairperson. A little, Tyler admitted. But excited too. I have some ideas about the summer mentorship program. Alexander smiled. I have no doubt they're excellent ideas. Natalie joined them, accepting congratulations from a passing school administrator, before turning to her son. Your speech was perfect, Tyler. I couldn't be prouder. As the three stood together, their unlikely bond evident to anyone watching, Margaret approached with a camera, How about a photo for the foundation website? They positioned themselves naturally, Natalie with her arm around Tyler's shoulders, Alexander standing beside them, his hand resting lightly on Tyler's back. The pose wasn't forced or artificial, it simply reflected what they had become to each other. "Ready?" Margaret asked, raising the camera. 1, 2, 3. In that frozen moment, captured forever in pixels and eventually framed in the foundation's main office, was the image of what Tyler had described in his speech. Not just 3 individuals, but a constellation of lives connected through one simple act of kindness. $1 given freely, without expectation of return, had transformed not just their lives but would now reach countless others. As spring blossomed into summer, and summer gave way to fall, the ripples continued to spread, touching lives in ways that even Alexander Miller's billions alone could never have accomplished. For it wasn't money that had created this change, but something far more valuable: the recognition that even in our darkest moments, a single act of compassion can illuminate a path forward that none could have imagined.